Building the Great Sky Islands from Tears of the Kingdom in Minecraft. I'm late. I'm like super late. Grazi already did a video on it, and this guy named Lurfing built it before the map came out. But hey, you get to watch my video now. My totally for the 1-year anniversary. Yeah? And look at this.
Skyward Sword has always been my favorite Legend of Zelda game.
Skyward Sword, he says. You can't just trust a Skyward Sword enjoyer, right? But yeah, sorry about my upload schedule. I uploaded 3 videos and immediately dove into a 150 plus hour burnout nightmare. But we're here. We made it. I have a lot more stuff planned for this channel, and I'll let you know some of the stuff I thought of towards the end of this video. But for now, let's jump into it. So, Tears of the Kingdom releases, and I'm immediately blown away by the Great Sky Islands. So of course, me looking to make a video on this game, I immediately think to build this. It's pretty, it's iconic, there's just one big flaw. It's big. Like, it's big. So not totally wanting to start a huge project, I look for other places. Naturally, the next landmark you visit besides the Great Sky Islands is the small outpost outside of Hyrule Castle. This would have been fine to build, but I was kinda looking for something more significant. You don't spend a whole lot of time here in game. So I decided to check out the existing villages from Breath of the Wild to see if anything major had changed. And yes, they had changed, but nothing that I was really hoping for. The Rita village just has snow, Zora's domain is now polluted, Gerudo Town is playing Plants vs Zombies, and Goron City, opioid crisis. However, the smaller villages were a bit more promising. The 2 that I considered were Hateno village, which has a cool mushroom theme now, and Kakariko, which has these rings that have fallen down from the sky. I would do these villages, but the rings and the mushrooms take a lot less time than you would think, so the video would just be 1 minute of me adding in the new stuff and then 15 minutes of me just doing what was in the previous game. So maybe there's something in the new underground area. The underground is really cool, but it is kind of just terrain with ruins scattered around. There is some significant places like Yiga clan hideouts and some facilities that I don't have footage of, but just like the refuge outside of Hyrule, they aren't very significant. So now kind of panicking, I explore more of the sky, cause that's what they've been hyping up about this game. But of course, nothing came close to the Great Sky Islands. Like, look, they're right there. They're in the background. How am I gonna build this small island with it just sitting there in the background? So I cave, and I start cutting out the minimap to use as a guide. So something cool that Nintendo added to the minimap that wasn't in Breath of the Wild is coordinates, and I'm going to be using these coordinates to figure out the height map of the terrain. To start, I clarify what parts of the map are floating by cutting out all the islands. I raise them to a rough height now, but when I go back through making pillars, I'll correct them to a more accurate height. To make the pillars, I use this command, which takes Tears of the Kingdom's height coordinate and subtracts from it to line up with Minecraft's y-axis. I then stack it upwards based on that number. So, that was easy enough. That took 10 hours. You can tell by my gradual loss of sanity naming these replay files. But now that I'm done making the pillars, I can now begin raising the terrain to connect the key points I had laid out. So you know what that means. Let's go through this one more time. For the floating islands, I temporarily move them off to the side to work on them. I do this because the plugin I'm using to make the terrain, Go Brush, does spill over the edge if I get too close to it. When raising the terrain, I raised any water parts to the actual water level, so I'll need to go back through and deepen those parts to match the terrain underneath the water. Now that the height map is finished, what we're left with is a bunch of cylinders in the rough shape of what the terrain actually is. All that's left to do is to shape what we have into a more accurate shape. This being any overhangs, hills that need to be smoothed over, or caves that I need to cut out. We'll be done with the terrain soon, I promise. Let's go through it one more time. Now that the shape of the terrain is finally done, I can add some simple texturing. For the grass, I use yellow terracotta, and for the stone, I make a gradient consisting of dead coral, tuff, acacia logs, and cyan terracotta. I then apply fast async world at its crack pattern to add some variation and depth. The only thing left to do before starting on the final draft of the terrain is to make some assets that I'll be reusing throughout the map. I'll need to make some trees, bushes, and these rock patterns found at the edges of some islands. Now that I'm done with the assets, I'll start here and make my way around the map clockwise. To make the grass look more like, well, grass, I mix wheat at its last two growth stages and horn coral. I also add in the occasional lilac patch because there's a bit of flower scattered around the in-game grass. Heading down this valley, there seems to be a no longer functional bridge that used to lead down to this island below, that's now inhabited by this guy. There's also 4 super cool box dudes. So something I like to do, if you haven't seen my Twilight Princess videos yet, is change some stuff up if I think it would look cool. And I thought I could remake what these giant stumps used to be before they were cut down. It just feels better to have all these roots connecting to something huge. For this stump, I go with a bonsai, but for the other stumps, I'll pick other trees. Heading into this cave beside the pond, creatively named Pondside Cave, there are some ruins towards the entrance, ore deposits, and bright bloom plants. I start by adding a dirt texture to the floor, and using a placeholder block to add in some greenery. For the ore, I use deep slate blocks along with the deep slate ores, and for the bright bloom plants, I use a mixture of Azure Bluette and Lily of the Valley flowers. I then add light blocks on top of them to give them the effect that they're glowing. I thought that these were a pretty cool detail, but of course Grazi did the exact same thing, so now it looks like I copied him. Heading out of this cave, there's an outpost immediately to the right. Other than that, it's pretty much just a straight path to the first shrine. Heading up to the first shrine, there are some dilapidated stairs surrounded by some cool rock formations. The shrine itself is an egg-shaped rock with a dragon ring wrapped around its sides. They usually have a cool swirl above them, but I've already gone in this one. They only appear before they're discovered, probably to help you locate them. Heading up the terrain beside the shrine, there's a unique tree that I didn't account for when making the assets, so I quickly make one because this tree is used in other places on the map. Past the shrine is a giant lake and docks to build your raft to the other side. Across the lake are these stone structures and a small bridge leading to a collapsed house that now has a tree growing out of it. I also remember to do the hidden passageway underneath the waterfalls. Now that the area by the lake is finished, I can now work my way up to this island off to the side. It houses one of the first Korok tents that you'll encounter, along with some ruins in the background. I decided to build the tent on a slightly larger scale so that I can add in its details a little better. Heading back to the main island, I can start this next section which has this shallow river running from a pond. Along the river is a larger outpost, a fairly intact building with a cooking construct in it, and a small pond with a slightly submerged building with a path leading up to a bridge. Now to build the area by the pond. Around the pond is a big range for the player to practice shooting a bow for the first time. Across from it is another ruined building. Heading further down this path leads you to a little island off to the side. And across from everything is another island with a house. Across this broken bridge is a small logging area with a track that leads up to another area. But ignoring that for now, up this cliffside there is some more of these pillars, there's a lot of these, and some wooden boards to build a makeshift bridge over the gaps. Approaching the second shrine, we have more of those pillars on this descending terrain, and the shrine itself is on top of a worn down spiral staircase. You may have noticed that I copied the other shrine and pasted it in. But you'd be a fool if you thought Nintendo modeled a new shrine every time they needed one. If Nintendo can cheat, I can too. Towards the bottom of the staircase is a small river. I have no idea where this water is coming from. And past that is this terrain containing the endpoint of the track from earlier. Heading toward the Temple of Time, there's a massive lake filled with giant lily pads underneath, as well as a small floating island off to the side. There's also a construct cooking a mushroom. I'm gonna hold off building the Temple of Time for now, because it is super cool and I want to leave it for last. Totally not because I'm scared to build it. Further ahead, there's a path leading through a forest ending at a pond. To the right and up the hill, there is another pond overshadowed by two islands. The top island houses a third pond, and the lower one has a building which, interesting enough, has a pathway leading off of the island, hinting that maybe in the past these islands weren't floating? To the left of the main path, we have a dip down in the terrain and this raised structure. Past the lake is an open area with a brick flooring that is now being overgrown with trees. It seems to lead down to this island, which suggests that at one point it was connected. To the left of the pond we have a small town of ruined buildings. Maybe at one point this was some kind of market area? They got a swimming pool. Heading up this slope, we enter the snowy area of the Great Sky Islands. On the left, there is a pond and a structure next to some ruins. And on the right, there are some docks to sail across the river. Before I start building though, all of this terrain is still grass, so I quickly change everything to snow. I also need to change the stone to ice, and certain areas you're not supposed to be able to climb. I then decide to go back over the snow and smooth it over with different snow layers. The last thing I need to do is make new assets. Basically, I need to make white variants of everything I have so far with less leaves. I forgot to mention the area up the hill from the dock. There's a small forest leading to this ice-covered platform. To get to the top, the game wants you to chop down a tree and build a climbable surface up. Or if you're like me and already have the paraglider, you can kinda just glide there. Heading across the river, we have a building next to a buried pathway leading up to a Korok puzzle. In the other direction, we have stairs advancing up the terrain. Switching to the other side of the river, we have another building, and towards this waterfall, you take a hidden pathway etched in the wall behind it. At the top of the hidden pathway, there is a small bridge to cross the stream leading to a Combat Constructs campout. Further up is the waterfall that is the source of the river. Behind it is a small gap in the ice that allows you to climb up. Above that area, we have another ice-covered platform, however this one has a small gap to climb up. Below the platform though is the same puzzle from before. You cut down these trees to climb up this ice wall. This is how you probably got up if you decided to travel the opposite way around the Great Sky Islands, which I mean is a way cooler way than just climb up behind the waterfall. The trees are resting on top of what kind of reminds me of old castle ruins, if you've ever been to like an old castle. So it is my personal headcanon that up here used to be a castle of some sorts. Heading further under this overhang is the bottomless cave, which I'll be coming back to. And up at the very top, we have a building and our third shrine. For the second stump, I thought I would build a tree with a wide trunk, because you're able to walk through this one. So what better tree than the Baobab tree? You know, like a medium-sized one. Going through the tree on the right, there is our first Zonite device dispenser. So like the shrines, I'll make one of these to use around the map at other locations. The dispenser is located on this raised terrain with a broken spiral staircase leading up. Next to it is this runway to glide down to the Temple of Time. This runway was kind of challenging. It happened to be the most detailed structure so far, then on top of all of that, it's on a 45-degree angle. For these larger structures, I find it a lot easier to build some of it not destroyed than re-destroy it. It takes a lot less brainpower to build, and it ends up looking a lot more natural in my opinion. Now heading through the bottomless cave to get to the lower snow area, we have this room with stone walls up top. Going further down, we pass by a lot of ruins built into the walls, with roots from the tree above weaving down through everything. Leaving the cave, we arrive at the lower snow area. There's not too much to talk about this area, but there is a small podium to the left with a captain construct, and further down there's this little overhang with these two constructs camping out. Finally, at the end of the path, we have a cave that leads down to the grassy area again. To some keen observers, you may realize that the exit of the cave is nowhere where it should be, but just like the big trees, this is me adding more to the map. I thought it would look better here, and it's not a mistake. I promise. To procrastinate building the next structure coming up, I decide to add a little bit more details across the snowy area. I add snowy grass on top of the snow with white glass panes and candles. I also add some cobwebs at the bottom of the waterfalls to look like mist. The structure in question is this collapsed bridge isolating this small section of the snowy region. It's another detailed structure, however instead of being on a hard 45-degree angle, it's on an even more awkward 15-degree angle. It also houses a Korok puzzle on the top. Believe it or not, despite this bridge being on a weird angle, I still only have to build one side of it. Copying it over is just far more complicated, as you can see here. Heading into the cave leading back down to the grassy area, you're immediately presented with two pathways. Going right leads to this construct next to a cooking pot. And through this crack in the wall, there's a hidden room with a cliff. This is where you would end up if you had gone left instead. Exiting the cave, now on the other side of the broken bridge. The bridge seems like it used to lead over to this arena where you fight your first flux construct. It looks like after the island broke off the big fancy bridge, the Zonite built a smaller bridge to get to it before that one also broke off. Unlucky. The arena itself is pretty much just a cylinder with a slightly buried stone ring pattern on the ground. Beyond the arena is an open field leading to an area with these old curved stone tracks on the ground. Heading upwards, we have our second device dispenser and this little loop of islands connected by rails. To head across the rails, you use one of the many minecarts laying around, or if you're cool like me, you can just walk across. The first island has another Korok tent and a building in the best condition we've seen so far. Going up the hill and across the rails to the next island, we have another building and the stone walkway. Then to get back to the main island, you drop down to this pond. Past the stone tracks, there's a huge slope down to a building. We've now looped all the way back around to the bonsai I built towards the start. At the bottom of the cliffside, we end up where we started. The only place left to build in this area is across the lake. On the other side of the lake, there's a construct inhabiting a collapsed building. Heading up the stairs next to them leads to a track emerging out of a cave. And to the left of that, there's an outpost housing a captain and 2 battle constructs. The last place we need to build in this area is a cave named Mining Cave. The cave has rails running down it halfway before switching back to the stone-like rails from before. Deeper in this cave is a pitch black area that you need to light up with bright bloom plants. There is an abundance of zonite ore here, and at the end of the cave is a forge where you can trade that zonite ore for batteries and crystals. Finally, past the forge is a railway back up to the area before. The only area left before finally making it back to the Temple of the Time is a couple of islands directly above this area. I'll start at this island, then make my way up to the island that you start at. This island is the second island you visit and is probably my favorite. It's just pretty. I would build this in the direction you play in normally, but for some reason I decided to build it from here. This is a mini island with a house that's connected by a still functioning bridge, unlike the other one of its kind we saw a while back. Across the bridge we pass by a collapsed building before arriving at another house at the end of the path. Towards the center, we have the staircase surrounded by some unique terrain leading up to the pond that breaks your fall from the starting island. Now to do the starting island. On the bottom, I need to make this stone exit where you jump down to the previous island. And at the top we have our third tree stump with a lot of roots. I hope you like watching me make those. And then heading down the hill we have... Oh no! Don't worry, this runway happens to be on a good angle this time. For this stump, I was going to build another tree, however this island is at the build height limit, and I could not figure out how to change it for the life of me, so I just settled for a normal stump filled with water like it is in game. I also do this little off-skirt island with a submerged house. Before we loop all the way back to the Temple of Time, I have a bit of a confession to make. I forgot to do the interior of the starting island. I'm sorry. I also missed a couple of other minor islands. It's a big map, okay? I'm sorry. So I will take this time to respect the areas of the map that I have missed. If it's requested enough, maybe I'll force myself to go back and do these. Maybe. But now on to the main attraction. So, back at the Temple of Time, I left myself a cutout from the map to give me a good idea of what the size will be. To get it out of the way, I lift it up and set it to glass so it doesn't block out the sun. I'll first start off with a staircase leading up to the platform in front of the temple. My first instinct was to make the stairs going up by one slab, but that ended up being too steep. So then I tried it with 2 slabs, but of course that wasn't nearly high enough. So I mix stairs and slabs to make a block and a half pattern. The platform itself has a stone circle pattern in the middle surrounded by raked gravel. To the left it branches out to a collapsed pathway, and to the right the same thing, but this side fell in water. The right side also has a tree growing up the side. Oh boy, time for the temple. Get it? The temple consists of 4 curved layers. They look straight from here, but if you look at it from the top, they do have a slight curve. I start by making the entrance and then move on to the base of the temple. I then start with the layers. The first one was a little difficult, but after it was done, I could reuse it for the next 2 layers by just extending it a little. Notice that I said next 2 and not next 3. This is because the 4th layer is kinda ridiculous. It shoots out from the roof in this really awkward front leaning shape, and it has these 2 end pieces with an even more awkward position. Alright, that actually wasn't too bad. Let's look at it from a far angle.
Oh shit!
Yeah, who knew that building 2 inches from something would be a bad idea? I fixed the top layer by extending each side and making the top more steep. I then textured the front with some greenery and this tree branch growing up from the side. To make the grass look more natural on the stone bricks, I add a gradient consisting of oak and weathered copper from the yellow terracotta. They both have slab and stair variations and happen to be a near perfect transition. Behind the 4th area is 2 staircases leading down to a roof area. It has a center circle and gravel surrounded by flowing water coming from these 4 dragon fountains. This is all being held on an oval-shaped foundation. Now for the inside. There are some stairs leading up to an altar surrounded by these pools of water. Behind the altar are some rotating platforms you can use the recall ability on. You can use them to get to your first goddess statue, then after you increase your health, you can exit out the back. This interior had a whole bunch of colors that just were not in Minecraft, like the main pathway and these goldish tiles on the ground. I just continue with stone bricks for most of the vaguely grays and planks for the gold colors. I start out with just the floor to get a good idea of the size for all the details before I start defining the walls. Something I didn't notice until building it was that these two wheels are actually not identical. One is a perfect circle while the other one has little strands coming off it like they're representing the sun and moon. Too bad you can't really see them that well in the build because, you know, it's a small scale in Minecraft. Exiting out the back, we reach the final stretch. Since the interior went up in elevation, the exit cuts straight through the first layer on the back side. I also need to lush up the back of the temple itself. Before I start on anything though, I need to remove the excess blocks from when I mirrored the front to the back. All that's left of the map now is this broken path leading to the pedestal where you place the Master Sword, and jump back down to the surface. With all that done, we can at last view the final product. Holy cow, this video ended up being so much longer than I thought it would. Thank you so much for hanging with me till the end, it really means a lot. This project was super fun to make and I love how it turned out. On my Twilight Princess videos, I got a few comments asking if a world download was available, and I didn't have one, so I went ahead and made one for whoever wants them. Just a fair warning though, I use a lot of illegally placed blocks in my builds, so if you don't have plugins and stuff to protect them, they might break. I've set up a Patreon, and now for only $60 a month, I'm joking. I did set up a Patreon, but what I have so far of the Twilight Princess map and the Great Sky Islands are on there right now for free. I do eventually plan on fully setting it up, but that will be in the future when I feel confident enough to consistently produce content. If you end up using either of the maps for anything really cool, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about it. As said all the way towards the beginning of this video, I'll now talk about my plans for the future of this channel. Moving forwards, I'm going to try my best to upload bi-weekly, emphasis on try. Any big projects like this one, I'll most likely split up into different parts to avoid big gaps in uploads, but here are some video ideas I plan on making. Buckle up, there's a lot. I'll be doing a video on Lethal Company, making some moons and such. Pikmin 4, probably the first area with all the plants and stuff. I think that would look cool in Minecraft. I recently participated in a huge building collab on the server The Bakery, and I would like to share my experience with that. I'm going to be working on an RPG server with some of my friends that I will be building and will help design. The basic premise we have so far is that you're going to be able to pick between 3 races. Depending on what race you pick, you'll have a special ability. Like if you pick the bird race, you'll spawn in a unique village and be able to fly. Same thing for like the aquatic race, except you can swim in water fast, etc. If that at all sounds interesting, we'll be hosting an open beta, as soon as I actually build something to play on. With Netflix's Avatar series out, Avatar is kind of relevant, so I would love to do something from that. I have no idea what I would make from it though, so leave a comment, tell me what I should make from that. I'll definitely continue making the Twilight Princess map, I haven't forgotten that. And I want to start making shorts. A fun way I could do that is building the top comments prompt. So I'll start that with this video. So yeah, if you have a prompt in mind, leave a comment or like somebody else's comment you'd like to see. And lastly, I took a trip to Japan and I took so many photos of different things I would want to build. And I could tell some funny stories I have from my experience over the time lapse. So if any of those sound interesting to you, stick around. Any other ideas you guys have, I want to hear them. Spam the comments, do your worst. I only have like 32 subscribers, I can handle it. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks.
What? Seriously? You've been fed. What else do you want? This cat is too much.